Is your family who you think? Shocking DNA test reveals unexpected truth. Hi, I'm 19M living an almost normal life. I go to school at college, hang out with my friends, and spend time with my family on weekends. One day, I was having a conversation with my dad. He told me he was really interested in learning more about our family's history, where our ancestors came from way back in time. I didn't think much about it at first, but then he suggested something kind of cool. He said we should both take a DNA test. He said he had a feeling in his gut, a hunch, that we might learn some interesting things about our family background. I thought it would be fun to find out where we came from, so we both ordered DNA test kits and sent them in with our little samples. A few days after we mailed the kits in, I got an email saying my test results were ready online. My dad got his results too. We were both excited to see what they would say, but also a little bit nervous. I went on the website for the company that did the test to see what we could learn. The first thing I looked at was the basic information. It showed us a breakdown of where in the world our ancestors probably came from, which was neat. Then I clicked on a part of the website that talked about DNA relatives. This section showed a list of people who shared some of the same DNA with me. The very first name on the list was my dad, which of course it should be. But then something caught my eye. There was a number next to his name that showed how much DNA we shared. That number seemed wrong. It was a lot lower than it should be for a father and child. I stared at the screen, completely confused. This didn't make any sense. My dad was my dad, right? Why would the DNA test say something different? The website showed a percentage next to my dad's name that said how much of our DNA matched. This number was only 33%. That didn't seem right at all. Normally, a father and child share around 50% of their DNA. This number meant we shared more DNA like half-brothers than a real father and son. It was impossible to understand. We even have the same paternal haplogroup, which is a fancy way of saying a special kind of DNA passed down from dads in our family for a long time. And let's not forget that we look alike too. This whole thing just didn't make sense. Maybe the test was wrong somehow. How could this be true? I had put my trust in this DNA test, but now I wasn't so sure anymore. I decided to dig a little deeper and see if the other matches on the test could help clear things up. Scrolling down the list, I saw a name that jumped out at me, my cousin's name. The test said we shared 29% of our DNA. That seemed really high for a cousin. Normally, cousins only share around 12.5% of their DNA. This was all way too strange. The test results were giving me numbers that just didn't fit with what I knew about family and DNA. I had no idea what to believe anymore. The number next to my cousin's name on the list hit me like a punch in the gut. It wasn't just a high number that showed we were close relatives, it was a very specific number. According to the website, the amount of DNA we shared suggested she wasn't just a regular cousin, but actually my half-sister. There had to be a mistake, this couldn't be true. Needing answers, I grabbed my phone and started searching online about what the different DNA match percentages meant. For hours, I read and learned everything I could about DNA and how it gets passed down through families. Finally, I found some information that explained the meaning behind the high match percentage with my cousin. If the test results were accurate, it meant we shared a significant amount of DNA, which only happens if you have one parent in common. The only way that made sense, the only explanation, was if my biological father was actually my dad's brother, my uncle. Shock, anger, at not knowing the truth. Confusion, how could something like this happen? Why hadn't anyone told me? I had always trusted my family, but now everything felt like a big lie. I needed some answers, and the only person who might have them was my mom. I felt nervous, but I knew I had to find out the truth. There was one new piece of information that kept sticking out in my mind, my uncle. I found my mom in the kitchen. Then, I blurted it out. I asked her directly if she had ever been romantically involved with my uncle, and she quickly said no. But I couldn't just leave it at that. I told her about the DNA test results and explained what the low match percentage between me and my dad meant. She listened quietly, her face changing from surprise to a different feeling, a look that seemed sad and heavy. Then, all of a sudden, she started to cry. She admitted that she did have a relationship with my uncle a long time ago, and that according to the test, he was actually my biological father. She said it was a big mistake, a secret they kept hidden because it wasn't okay for them to be together. She fell to the ground, sobbing, and begged me not to tell my dad. My mom's reaction and what she told me were so shocking that I didn't know what to do next. I knew I couldn't just keep this a secret, so I decided to call my cousin, who I just realized was actually my half-sister because of the DNA test. When I told her what happened, she got really upset. She yelled so loud I could barely understand her, and then she hung up the phone. Everything felt crazy and confusing. Right then, my dad walked in the door and saw my mom crying on the floor. He asked her what was wrong. I knew I had to tell him everything, no matter how hard it was. So, I explained the whole thing to him. I told him about the DNA test results and how they showed he wasn't my biological father. I also told him the truth about the affair my mom had with my uncle. His face kept changing, he looked confused, then hurt, and then really angry. I felt awful for telling him this news, but he deserved to know the truth, even if it was painful. This was definitely the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my entire life. My dad didn't say a word at first. He just looked at me with a serious expression for a moment, then looked over at my mom, and without another word, walked out of the room. I guess he needed some time to himself to think and calm down. I went to my own room and closed the door tightly. I really needed some space to be alone for a while and figure out what was going on. From outside my room, I could faintly hear the sounds of my family arguing. Their voices were getting louder and angrier, and it felt like everything normal in our lives was starting to crumble around me. A little while later, I heard the familiar sound of my grandparents pulling into the driveway. They must have gotten a call and rushed over to see what all the commotion was about. With their arrival, things seemed to get even more intense. Not long after that, I heard my aunt's voice and my uncle booming laugh outside my door. A wave of dread washed over me. This whole situation was bad enough already, but with more family members arriving, things were only going to get more complicated. Deciding it was best to avoid whatever was happening outside, I stayed put in my room. The shouting coming from outside suddenly turned into loud noises and bumps. It sounded like my dad and my uncle were wrestling with each other, like they were in a fight. The booming sounds echoed through the whole house. This whole mess felt like it was all my fault, and I couldn't stop feeling responsible for it. But what was done, and now my dad and uncle were fighting because of it. I knew I needed to do something to help, but I wasn't sure what. Yelling at them to stop seemed like a bad idea, and I was way too scared to try to break them apart myself. So, I grabbed my phone, which felt like a lifeline in this scary situation. Some friends started writing back to me really quickly, and it felt a little overwhelming at first. Some messages were filled with kind words, telling me it wasn't my fault and that things would be okay. Others offered ideas about what I could actually do. One friend suggested that I call my dad and tell him that I loved him, even though he was mad. It seemed like a simple thing to do, just a few words, but maybe it could help calm things down. Maybe it could remind him that I cared about him, no matter what was going on. Even though I wanted to help my dad, I still felt really caught in the middle. Part of me wanted to fix things, but another part felt like it was all my fault for finding out about the test results. I knew I couldn't just ignore it though, I had to try to make things better somehow. Later, I reached for my phone and dialed my dad's number. When he answered, I told him that no matter what happened, he was still my dad and I loved him very much. There was a quiet moment on the other end of the phone, then my dad started crying. He was really upset, but he thanked me for saying that. Talking to my dad helped a little, but I also really wanted to hear what my mom had to say about everything. I went to her and asked her if she would be willing to explain things to me. She sat me down and started talking about what happened with the affair. It was a confusing situation, and she explained that things were really difficult for her back then. I could see the sadness in her eyes as she spoke. It wasn't easy to listen to, but I tried my best to keep an open mind and understand where she was coming from. Even though I could understand why my mom felt the way she did, and kind of felt bad for her, there was also this other feeling mixed in. It was like someone had lied to me or kept a secret, and I couldn't just forget about it. I decided to reach out to my cousin again to try to fix things between us. I told that I was sorry I acted the way I did before, and I explained how everything made me feel. My cousin listened to me. It felt like we were becoming friends again. It wasn't perfect, but it was a good start towards feeling better about everything. The whole family thought it would be a good idea to get together and have a big talk about everything that had happened. At first, it felt kind of awkward and everyone was on edge. But then, one by one, each person shared how they were feeling and what they thought about the situation. As everyone listened to each other, it felt like they were starting to understand each other's point of view a little better. Update 1. Even though we knew things wouldn't get fixed right away, we were all determined to work things out and see eye to eye again. It would take time, but we were willing to put in the effort. One time, while we were talking things through, someone suggested we try family counseling. They thought it would be a good way to heal the hurt feelings we all had and start trusting each other again. We thought it was a great idea, so we decided to give it a shot. Our very first meeting with the counselor was super scary, but it was also a big relief to finally have a place where we could talk freely and honestly without anyone getting upset. The counselor was like a guide, helping us understand how we were each feeling and why we saw things differently. The more we went to counseling sessions, the better things started to get. It wasn't always easy, and sometimes we'd take a step backward instead of forward. But slowly but surely, we were learning how to talk to each other in a way that made sense and helped us understand each other better. Even though we were going to family counseling together, some of us decided to also meet with counselors one-on-one. This helped us deal with our own feelings and problems that we didn't necessarily want to talk about in front of everyone else. Fixing the trust between me and my dad was hard work, but we took things one step at a time, day by day. We started talking more honestly with each other, spending more time together doing things we both enjoyed. My mom knew she had done something wrong, and she really felt bad about it. She apologized to all of us for what she did and showed that she was truly sorry. Even though it wasn't easy to forgive her, we noticed how hard she was trying. My uncle also admitted he did wrong and wanted to fix things. He understood that what he did had hurt everyone in the family, and he wanted to make things right again. Update 2. During our counseling sessions, my cousin didn't shy away from sharing about everything that happened. It was surprising to hear how much the situation had affected everyone. We all listened carefully to what my cousin had to say and tried our best to be there for support. Looking back on how the DNA test changed things, I see now that it was kind of a push in the right direction, even though it caused some problems at first. It made us feel sad and confused, but it also made us face the truth and work on fixing our relationships. Over time, I started to feel okay about everything that happened and accepted that our family wasn't exactly how I thought it was before. We weren't a perfect family from a magazine, but we were a real family, with all our problems and all our love. It took a while and a lot of effort, but we learned how to function as a family even though things were different now. Finally feeling more relaxed and happy, I was ready to keep moving forward with my family right there with me.